Great. Marco, first of all, thank you so much for being here today and for all your presence throughout the day and to being available for some questions now. So my first question is, from your point of view, what are the main regulatory hurdles in Europe and in Italy limiting psychedelic research, essentially?
Well, I don't think there are legal hurdles at the continental level. Every country can do whatever they want if they want. So I'd rather stress the lack of political will to continue something that has been done here and there, and we can single out within the European Union, certainly the Czech Republic has done great work. Within Europe, Switzerland and the UK have done much better work, or they go back to the 90s with their research. So I would say the major problem would be, on top of having a political decision to be taken by either the government or universities or private research center, would be to dedicate enough resources for such a thing to happen. So since the beginning of 2024, the European Union, that has this framework program that's called Horizon Europe, has devoted 6.5 million euros for a 5-year program to study psychedelics together with some pathologies or physical conditions. End of life is one of them. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis is another one. Anorexia is a new disease that is going to be studied, and also other minor issues, and depression, of course. So we already have a step in the right direction, maybe not financed enough. I'm not sure we can actually say that it's a political decision that has been taken for forever and for granted, because at the end of 2024 we will have a new commission in Europe, and so it will be not necessarily in the main issues that are going to be supported, but the person that is going to be the next commissioner for research or health will make a difference. So far, we understand that there is no opposition, which is already a good start. So at the European level, there's no problem. And I would also say at the world level, there's no problem, because the 3 UN conventions have been adopted to allow people to have these plants, substances, and molecules available for medical and scientific research. So in a way, if you block research, you violate the conventions that have been used also to impose or to launch the so-called war on drugs. Then again, because of the war on drugs, the stigma and the additional regulation and controls that have been imposed on the availability for medical and scientific reasons has created a stigma that it's difficult to take away after so many years. Now, we are lucky because in the United States, which is the motherland of the prohibition, war on drug, things have changed over the last 10, 15 years. So I'm not saying that the US is used as a model for many things, but at least knowing that they're not against, that they will not pose a problem to Europeans to do research, it's a good news. It's a good piece of good news. The problem is that they are going ahead and Europe is lagging behind. So we hope that in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe, things will speed up now. Then there is the regulatory model in Europe that mimics what is done in the United States. So if the Food and Drug Administration green lights something, the Europeans cannot brag about it. So after 6 months or a year, usually we have the same kind of green light happening in Europe.
And I'm really glad you mentioned the U.S. and you mentioned how things have changed in the last 5 or 10 years. I would argue that they've even changed even very recently. Like what we've seen now with even the results of the recent election kind of put the focus on the fact that now I do see support, a bipartisan support, also in the U.S., even traditionally from, of course, the Democrat side, but also the Republican side, being supportive of research and supportive of advancing studies in the domain of
not only that, but at the state level over the last 4 years, in fact, laws have changed in states like Oregon or Colorado. They have legalized access to also plants, psychedelic plants. Unfortunately, the referendum in Massachusetts didn't go well. I mean, they lost for like 3-4 point percentage, but little by little things are moving. So once you have a situation at the state level that would allow anything to happen, also non-medical use, I think those that are doing research may relocate to those states and then carry out their research and then publish, and so that we have the possibility to learn from people that are going ahead and move elsewhere. At the federal level, it is going to be interesting to see how the next Secretary of Defense may want to insist on the need to provide psychotherapy assisted with psychedelics for veterans, because it's a huge problem in the United States. They have the highest number of suicides happening because of traumas taken once back home and developed in the field. The U.S. has the biggest presence in combat zones in the entire world. And so we're talking about, I think, millions of people that may be in need in a way or another of this kind of assisted psychotherapies.
Yeah, true. So maybe that's kind of the support to American veterans. That's maybe one of the elements that created the setting for a bipartisan support.
Absolutely, yeah. Because you have many people that have served in the army that have been elected at the state or national level. So, and they will finally continue doing what they've been doing as patients and also as advocates, which is something that is not necessarily automatic in Europe, certainly not in Italy. Once you're elected, you forget about your issues, and your main preoccupation is good to be re-elected the next time. So.
And now, going back to Europe, do you see within Europe any trends, anything that's moving in a direction? Kind of, there's the decriminalization, there's the complete legalization. I think, for example, about the recent shift in Germany when it comes to legalizing marijuana. Do you see direction? If you had a crystal ball and looked out for the next 5 years?
If I had a crystal ball, I'll bet on Bitcoins and see what happens. But I'm a little more pessimistic about Europe than the US, because in the US things happen, maybe also for worse, but they happen, and at a quick pace. In Europe, because there's extra regulation on everything, I mean, the precautionary principle is the guiding light of our policies in this continent, but it's also becoming an excuse not to innovate. And so unless we have a younger generation of decision makers, but also judges, because some things can be challenged at the national or regional level before courts. And if you don't have people that have an experience, but also a wider kind of knowledge that includes scientific evidences in sentences that have to do with the law, things will never change. It's funny that you mentioned Germany, because Germany, as we speak, is going through a governmental crisis. Not for sure, certainly not for marijuana, but for economic issues. It is going to be interesting to see if the new government that may happen next year when they vote again in the spring, which it will be a lot more right-leaning than this one, which is a centrist, even if, I mean, it's a weird kind of coalition, will keep the law on marijuana in place, or they will go back to a more restrictive kind of access to. I mean, it's not really legalization, the one that we have in Germany. They have allowed, let's call them cannabis social club, to happen. That's it. I mean, it has to be within a specific circle, not for profit. There's not really a buy-in situation like you may have in California or New York State.
Got it. And last question now, let's bring it just back down to Italy. Do you see any trends within Italy? I mean, we've seen over the last few years the legalization of CBD. It feels like the Italian government is trying to take some steps back. Maybe there's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Where's the trend going there?
If we're talking about medical use, in theory, there is no problem. So we have to agree on what is the priority here. If to push for research or to apply research that has been done elsewhere. I'd go for the second option because it's cheaper, so to speak, less complicated because you don't have to go through universities that are already a little more conservative than elsewhere, especially in the medical department. and see to exploit the existing laws on palliative care and also on compassionate use of molecules that have been developed elsewhere that are not available here, but have proved to be useful for a specific kind of condition somewhere else. So the problem now would be to use the experience developed abroad and their therapeutic plans and documents and bureaucracy, distill it into an Italian context, which is always helpful, and then finally find not only patients but also doctors that are available to prescribe, and then set up a network of psychotherapists to accompany the psychotherapy with this new molecule. So I'm very negative when it comes to engage with the institution, even if my group, the Associazione Coscioni, has launched an appeal to the Minister of Health and Defense to try and do what they have already done elsewhere. But we're not asking permission to do anything. They said, our reading of the national legislation is this, and the law is the law. So you cannot, they can do a lot of things against the law, and they've done it with CBD already. But at the end of the day, you have a tribunal or a court where you can challenge their decision. But then the other part needs to be organized way more than it has been in the past.
Great. Well, Marco, thank you so much for your time, for your questions, and it's been really great having you.
Thank you.